The pack-led dreadnought learned the hard way. You don't fuck with humans. The massive alien warship turned into a field of shredded, scorched metal as the small human scout vessel unleashed a relentless barrage of railgun slugs and antimatter torpedoes, crippling the pack-led vessel through sheer grit and ingenious battle tactics. Commander Stephen Freeman smirked as he piloted his battered but victorious ship back to Earth. The recon mission had been a resounding success, confirming what many had suspected. The pack-led empire was on a ruthless campaign of conquest, enslaving alien species and stripping their worlds bare. Someone had to stop them, but would humanity step up? The pack-leds are coming. It's only a matter of time before they set their sights on Earth, Stephen warned the United Earth Defense Council upon his return. He pounded his fist on the podium. We must act now, before it's too late. Murmurs of concern rippled through the council chambers. They all knew the pack-leds posed an imminent threat, but many were reluctant to plunge into another devastating war so soon after the last interstellar conflict had brought humanity to the brink of extinction. Scars from that near apocalypse still ran deep. Heated debates erupted among the councillors. Some vehemently agreed with Stephen's call to arms. Others stubbornly insisted on diplomacy, convinced the pack-leds could still be reasoned with. As the council bickered and dithered, tensions mounted and divisions deepened. All the while, average citizens went about their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the gathering storm. Children played in green parks, couples strolled along bustling city streets, farmers tended to rolling fields of grain. A hard-won peace and prosperity, rebuilt from the ashes of war. But for how much longer? In the depths of pack-led space, Emperor Novak sneered as his spies informed him of the fracturing human council. The foolish Earthlings were making this all too easy. He barked orders to his generals, accelerating their plans to subjugate more worlds and build an unstoppable armada. Earth would be their ultimate prize. Outvoted but undeterred, Stephen received grudging permission from the council to assemble a small defensive fleet, a final Hail Mary to buy time for humanity to prepare. Within hours, his old wartime comrades flocked to his side, yearning to once again fight for a righteous cause. The battle lines were drawn. The pack-leds surged forward with all their might, determined to crush humanity under their heels. In their way stood Stephen and his ragtag band of human warriors, hopelessly outnumbered, but ready to fight to their last breath. The stakes couldn't be higher. The future of the human race hung by a thread. As the two sides hurtled toward a cataclysmic showdown, one question burned in everyone's mind. Would humans rally together in time to weather the coming storm, or would petty squabbles and indecision doom them to fall before the pack-led onslaught? As the spectre of all-out war loomed, Stephen wasted no time assembling a formidable fleet. He called upon his most trusted allies and requisitioned humanity's most advanced ships. Old friends answered the call, including Admiral John Ramsay, a battle-hardened veteran with more space battles under his belt than most captains had flight hours. Stephen and Ramsay pored over star maps, plotting strikes to cripple the pack-led war machine. We hit their supply lines hard and fast, Ramsay said, jabbing a finger at key routes. Bleed them dry, and we need intel on their capabilities, troop numbers, ship specs. Xirax Prime, Stephen said, the name heavy on his tongue. Our scouts report the pack-leds are strip-mining the hell out of it for resources. Days later, Stephen led a hand-picked strike team to infiltrate the pack-led operation on Xirax Prime. They slipped past perimeter defenses and moved swiftly through the alien mining complex, planting explosives on key equipment. Stephen hacked into the main database, his fingers flying over the controls as he downloaded reams of vital intelligence. Suddenly, alarms blared. Pack-led soldiers swarmed in, guns blazing. Stephen's team fought back hard, but they were outnumbered. Over the din of battle, a voice bellowed, "Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." General Krav, the Emperor's merciless right hand, emerged through the smoke, a mountain of armored muscle. All hell broke loose. Stephen and Krav traded vicious blows in brutal hand-to-hand combat as their troops clashed around them. Stephen's team fought valiantly, laying down covering fire as they fell back to their dropship. They barely escaped, the hatch slamming shut as Pakled fire pounded the hull. Stephen slumped in his seat, his fist clenched around a data drive. They had the intel, but the cost was high. Too many good men lay dead on that godforsaken planet. Back on Earth, Stephen presented his findings to the Council. The atmosphere was funereal as holographic displays painted a grim picture. The Pakled forces were vast, their technology advanced far beyond initial estimates. Councillors traded uneasy glances, the enormity of the threat sinking in. "We must strike first, hit them before they hit us," urged the hawkish General Eckhart. "No, we can still find a diplomatic solution," pleaded Ambassador Liam Novak. "This is all a misunderstanding. I'm sure the Emperor will see reason if we just reach out." Stephen eyed the ambassador warily. He argued the Pakled case too fervently, almost desperately. Could his loyalties be torn? Across the galaxy, Emperor Novak raged at news of the Zyrax Prime raid. He slammed a meaty fist on his throne. "The humans have sealed their fate. This insult will not stand." He turned to General Krav, his voice dripping with malice. "Accelerate our plans, crush them swiftly and without mercy. Let the galaxy bear witness to the price of defiance." Krav bowed low. "As you command." Already he was positioning Pakled warships throughout human space, silent and hidden, ready to strike at a moment's notice. On Itaris, a remote human colony, a science team detected strange readings from a remote region. Suspecting Pakled activity, Stephen led a small investigation team to the surface. What they found chilled them to the bone. A heavily guarded Pakled base, crawling with troops and scientists. At its heart, a massive doomsday weapon nearing completion, a planet killer. Stephen's mind reeled at the implications. The Paklids weren't just out for conquest, they were eradicators, bent on genocide. In a blaze of gunfire and explosions, Stephen's team destroyed the prototype weapon and razed the base. But the central component, the devastating core, was gone, whisked away by the Pakleds. A hollow victory. Returning to Earth, Stephen's revelation of the Pakleds' genocidal intentions rocked the Council to its core. The doves fell silent, their illusions shattered. Only the spectre of a galactic graveyard loomed. The Council at last stood united. The verdict was grim but unanimous. Humanity would rise to war, for nothing less than survival itself. 1,000 ships, 1,000,000 soldiers, every resource bent to the cause. Amid the frenzied preparations, no one noticed Ambassador Liam slipping away to send a secret communiqué. "Brother," he whispered into the secure channel, "the humans prepare for total war. Strike soon, or all may be lost." On the Pakled homeworld, Emperor Novak received the warning with cold satisfaction. He barked a single order to General Krav. "Begin the assault on Earth. Annihilate them." 1,000 ships surged forward, the mailed fist of Pakled might. And so the board was set, the pieces in motion. Human and Pakled locked in a titanic struggle that would consume stars and shake the very heavens. Only one species would emerge from the coming inferno. The drumbeats of war thundered loud. There was no turning back now. Stephen Freeman and Admiral Ramsey stood before a holographic display of the galaxy, their faces illuminated by the glow of countless stars. They pointed at key Pakled installations, discussing strategies in hushed tones. "We hit these targets simultaneously," Stephen said, highlighting several points. "Catch them with their pants down." Ramsey nodded. "Risky, but it might work. We'll need every ship we've got." As they finalized their plans, klaxons blared throughout the command center. A junior officer burst in, his face pale. "Sir, massive Pakled fleet just dropped out of warp. They're all over our defense grid." Earth's orbital platforms lit up, energy beams lancing out at the Pakled armada. But for every Pakled ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. Stephen gritted his teeth as he climbed into his fighter. "Red Squadron, on me. We're punching a hole through their left flank." Human fighters swarmed from carriers, dancing between lumbering Pakled cruisers. Stephen's voice crackled over the comms. "Use their size against them. Get in close where their guns can't track." A Pakled dreadnought loomed before them. Stephen rolled his fighter, dodging plasma bolts. "Concentrate fire on their engines." A barrage of missiles streaked out, slamming into the massive ship's thrusters. It listed to port, colliding with another Pakled vessel. But the tide was turning. A Pakled battle cruiser scored a direct hit on Stephen's ship. Alarms screamed as systems failed. "Damn it! All hands abandon ship!" Stephen led a boarding party onto General Krav's command vessel. They fought through corridors, energy weapons flashing, bodies piled up on both sides. Stephen kicked open the bridge doors to find Krav waiting. The two leaders clashed in furious hand-to-hand combat. Stephen ducked under Krav's meaty fist, landing a series of quick jabs. Krav stumbled back, spitting blood. "You cannot win, human!" With a final desperate lunge, Stephen tackled Krav to the ground. They grappled fiercely until Stephen locked the alien in a chokehold. Krav's struggles weakened, then ceased. Panting, Stephen stood, but his victory was short-lived. Krav's dying words chilled him to the bone. "Fool, this was just the first wave. Our main fleet approaches. Earth will burn." Stephen stared out the view screen at the raging battle. They were outnumbered, outgunned. He keyed his comm. "All ships, fall back to Rally Point Omega. We need a new plan." Back on Earth, Stephen gathered his most trusted officers. "We can't win a straight fight, not against their numbers. We need to cut off the head of the snake." He outlined his audacious scheme, a strike at the very heart of the Pakled Empire. It was a long shot, but their only hope. "I need volunteers," Stephen said. "This mission is as dangerous as they come." Without hesitation, Mike Thompson stepped forward. "I'm with you, sir, to the end." As Stephen's team prepared for their risky move, Admiral Ramsey rallied Earth's defenders. Cities became war zones as Pakled dropships disgorged troops. Humans fought street by street, building by building. Stephen's stealth ship slipped past the Pakled blockade, pushing its engines to the limit. As they neared Pakless Prime, a transmission came through. Mike's face was grim. "Sir, Ambassador Liam's gone AWOL. Intel suggests he's heading for Pakless Prime." Pakless Prime's defenses were formidable. Stephen led his team on a daring atmospheric insertion, their ships screaming towards the Imperial Palace. Anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. 2 ships exploded in flames. Stephen's voice was steady. "Stay on target." They crash-landed in the palace courtyard, immediately swarmed by Pakled elite guards. The humans fought like demons, energy weapons and fists flying. Stephen bulled his way through, Mike at his side. They burst into the throne room to find Emperor Novak waiting. The Pakled ruler sneered. "So the dogs come to beg for scraps." Stephen raised his weapon. "It's over, Novak. Call off your fleet." Novak laughed. "You still don't understand. Your extinction is inevitable. The strong devour the weak. It is the way of the universe." "No," Stephen growled. "We make our own way." They circled each other, tensed for combat. Suddenly a voice rang out. "Stop!" Ambassador Liam emerged from the shadows, a disruptor aimed at Stephen's head. "Well done, brother," Novak purred. "Our trap is sprung." Stephen's mind raced. How could he have been so blind? But before anyone could react, Mike Thompson hurled himself at Liam with a roar. They grappled for the weapon as Stephen lunged for Novak. In the chaos, a shot rang out. Mike slumped to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. But he'd done his job. Stephen had Novak in a headlock, the Emperor's own ceremonial dagger at his throat. As Novak sent the stand-down codes, Stephen knelt by Mike. His friend's breathing was shallow, labored. "We did it, sir," Mike whispered. "Save them all." His eyes closed for the final time. Stephen stood, grief and fury warring in his heart. He turned to the Pakled brothers. "You're coming with us. Your reign of terror ends today." As Stephen's team secured their prisoners, reports flooded in. The Pakled fleet was in retreat. Earth had held. But the cost had been staggering. Days later, Stephen stood before the United Earth Council. The chamber was packed, faces etched with equal parts joy and sorrow. Stephen's voice rang out, strong and clear. "We've won a great victory, but our fight is just getting started. The galaxy is vast and dangers lurk in the darkness between stars. We must remain vigilant, we must remain united, for only together can humanity forge its destiny among the cosmos." As the council chamber erupted in cheers, Stephen gazed out at the star-filled sky. Countless worlds awaited out there, and humanity would face whatever challenges came, head-on. Stephen Freeman stood before the United Earth Defense Council, his face etched with weariness. The victory over the Packleds had come at a steep cost, and now they faced the daunting task of stabilizing an empire. "We can't just leave Packless Prime to fester," Stephen argued. "If we don't establish order, we'll be fighting insurgencies for decades." The council members exchanged glances. Finally, Admiral Ramsey spoke. "Agreed. Stephen, we're tasking you with leading an occupation force. Root out resistance. Install a government that won't stab us in the back. Can you handle it?" Days later, Stephen's boots hit Packled soil. The acrid stench of burnt metal filled the air as his troops secured the landing zone. Wary eyes watched from windows and alleyways. The hostility was palpable. As Stephen's convoy rolled through the streets, a makeshift explosive detonated nearby. Shrapnel pinged off armored vehicles. "Get down!" Stephen shouted, tackling a young private to the ground as plasma bolts sizzled overhead. Insurgents melted back into the shadows before Stephen's men could return fire. These hit-and-run attacks continued for weeks, fraying nerves and sowing distrust. Stephen knew he needed a different approach. He arranged a meeting with moderate Pack-led leaders in a bombed-out government building. "I know you see us as conquerors," Stephen began, "but it doesn't have to be this way. Work with us. We can build something better together." General Krav, looking diminished without his battle armor, glowered from across the table. "And if we refuse?" Stephen met his gaze. "Then the fighting continues. More die on both sides. Is that what you want?" Slowly, painfully, progress was made. A provisional government took shape, with Krav reluctantly agreeing to serve as a figurehead. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. In the midst of this chaos, alarms blared. Security forces swarmed the detention center. But it was too late. Novak and Liam were gone, spirited away by an unknown traitor. Word reached Stephen on Packless Prime. He smacked his palm on the desk, startling his aides. "Damn it, we can't let them regroup. Assemble a strike team. We're going hunting." Intelligence pointed to Araxo 5, a remote Pack-led colony. Stephen's team approached cautiously, their stealth ship slipping past orbital defenses. What they found chilled them to the bone. A massive weapon, unlike anything they'd seen before. Novak's voice boomed over loudspeakers. "Behold the instrument of your destruction, humans. Flee our space, or watch your worlds burn." Stephen's mind raced. They had to stop this madness before it began. "Alpha team with me," he ordered. "We're going in." Plasma fire lit up the night as Stephen's forces assaulted the compound. They fought room by room, corridor by corridor. Stephen burst onto the main control deck to find Novak's finger hovering over the launch controls. Time slowed. Stephen's blaster came up. A single shot rang out. The console exploded in a shower of sparks. Returning to Packless Prime, Stephen threw himself into the work of nation-building. He rooted out the mole in the council's ranks, a low-level functionary seduced by Packled gold. New security protocols were put in place. Slowly, painfully, other Packled worlds began to fall in line. Not out of love for their human occupiers, but out of pragmatism. It was a fragile peace, built on shifting sands. As he looked out over the Packled capital, Stephen allowed himself a small smile. They had come this far. Whatever came next, humanity would face it head-on. Stephen Freeman stood atop the wall surrounding New Damascus, the largest human settlement on Packless Prime. His eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the sprawling Packled metropolis beyond. 5 years had passed since the uprising, yet tension still hung thick in the air. A young officer approached, datapad in hand. "Sir, we've got movement in the eastern quarter again. Looks like another protest forming. As the officer hurried off, Stephen's comm crackled to life. Commander Freeman, urgent message from Earth Command. Minutes later, Stephen stared at the holographic display in his war room. Admiral Ramsey's face was grim. We've picked up chatter, Stephen. Novak's resurfaced on Taro 7. He's gathering forces, stockpiling weapons. We need to hit him hard before he can regroup. As Stephen strode through the base barking orders, a grizzled lieutenant fell into step beside him. Heard the news, sir. I want in on this mission. Stephen glanced at the man. Mike Thompson, Jr., spitting image of his father. You sure about this, Mike? After what happened to your old man? Mike's eyes hardened. All the more reason, sir. Novak needs to pay. Hours later, their stealth transport pierced Taro 7's atmosphere. The lawless moon's surface was a patchwork of garish neon and pitch-black shadows. Stephen addressed his team. Intel's sketchy at best. We'll need to infiltrate the local haunts, squeeze some informants, watch each other's backs. They split into pairs, prowling the grimy streets. Stephen and Mike ducked into a seedy cantina, the air thick with alien smoke. As they nursed their drinks, Stephen's eyes darted from face to face. A hulking Pakled sat alone in the corner, fidgeting nervously. Stephen nodded to Mike. They approached the alien's table. You look like a man with something to sell, Stephen said quietly. The Pakled's eyes widened. He lunged for a concealed weapon, but Mike was faster. In a blur of motion, the lieutenant had the alien pinned. Wrong move, pal, Mike growled. Blaster fire erupted from across the room. Stephen dove for cover as patrons scattered. He caught a glimpse of Pakled mercenaries, weapons drawn. Mike, we need that info. I'll cover you. Stephen laid down suppressing fire as Mike dragged their captive out the back. Plasma bolts sizzled past Stephen's head as he backed towards the exit. He lobbed a stun grenade, buying precious seconds to escape. The alien sneered. You're too late, humans. The reckoning is... A single shot rang out. The Pakled slumped to the ground, revealing a shadowy figure behind him. You boys look like you could use a hand, a familiar voice drawled. Stephen's eyes widened. General Krav, what the hell are you doing here? The Pakled emerged from the shadows, a wry smile on his face. Let's just say our interests have temporarily aligned. Novak's compound is 10 clicks north. If we move now, we can catch him off guard. Stephen hesitated, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. Lead the way, General, but I've got my eye on you. As they raced through Taro 7's twisted canyons, Stephen keyed his comm. All units converge on these coordinates. We've got a shot at Novak. Don't let it slip away. Stephen's strike force assembled outside a heavily fortified compound. Energy shields shimmered in the moonlight. Krav pointed to a narrow service tunnel. That's our way in, but it won't be easy. Stephen nodded grimly. It never is. All units prepare to breach on my mark. The tunnel erupted in chaos as human and Pakled forces clashed. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the air, illuminating snarling faces. Stephen ducked and weaved, his blaster spitting death. They fought their way deeper into the compound, leaving a trail of broken bodies. Finally, they reached a massive blast door. This is it, Krav panted. Novak's inner sanctum. As the door slowly ground open, Stephen's blood ran cold. Novak stood before them, a triumphant sneer on his face, but it was the device behind him that sent chills down Stephen's spine. Behold, Novak crowed, the instrument of humanity's demise. Before anyone could react, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. Liam, Novak's brother, his eyes wild with fanaticism. For the purity of our race, he screamed, slamming his hand down on a control panel. The bioweapon hissed to life, spewing a sickly green mist. Stephen's team staggered, coughing violently. Fall back, Stephen roared. We need to contain this. As they retreated, Novak's laughter echoed behind them. Run, little humans, your extinction is at hand. Stephen's mind raced as they fled through the compound. The uninfected dropships would be here soon, but how many of his people were already compromised? How could they prevent this plague from spreading further? With a heavy heart, Stephen made the call. All infected personnel hold position in the compound. We can't risk further contamination. He met Mike's eyes, seeing the fear and acceptance there. I'm sorry, son. Your father would be proud. As the dropships touched down, Stephen took one last look at the brave men and women he was leaving behind. Novak's mocking voice rang out over the compound speakers. Look at the mighty humans abandoning their own. You're nothing but cowards. Stephen's expression resolute as he boarded the ship. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but first they needed to contain this threat before it consumed everything they had fought for. As Taro 7 receded behind them, Stephen's mind was already racing ahead to the challenges that awaited on Packless Prime. The real battle was just beginning. Stephen's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the chaotic battlefield from atop New Damascus's central command tower. Explosions rocked the city's outskirts as Novak's forces pressed their advantage. Smoke billowed from burning buildings, and the sounds of intense firefights echoed through the streets. "Status report," Stephen barked into his comm. "Sir, we've lost contact with Outpost Gamma," a frantic voice replied. "Liam's insurgents have overrun the eastern sector. They're pushing towards the center." Stephen's heart made. He turned to General Krav, who stood stoically beside him. "We need to consolidate our forces. Can your militia hold the northern approach?" Krav nodded grimly. "We'll do what we can, but we're outnumbered 10-1. "Then we'll have to be smarter," Stephen said. He tapped his tactical display, highlighting key defensive positions. "We'll funnel them into kill zones here and here. Use the rubble for cover." As Stephen's orders crackled across the comm channels, the city's defenders scrambled to implement his strategy. Human soldiers and Krav's loyalist packleds worked side by side, hauling debris to create barricades and setting up interlocking fields of fire. The first wave of Novak's elite guards slammed into their hastily prepared defenses like a battering ram. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Stephen's forces gave ground grudgingly, extracting a heavy toll for every meter gained. "They're pushing us back!" a panicked voice shouted over the comm. "Stand firm," Stephen roared. "We hold here or we die." For hours the battle raged street by street, building by building. The acrid smell of ozone and burning flesh filled the air. Stephen moved from position to position, rallying his troops and plugging gaps in the line with whatever reserves he could scrape together. As night fell, the attacks finally slackened. Stephen stumbled back to the command center, his uniform caked with dust and blood. He found Krav hunched over a holographic display of the city, his face etched with exhaustion. "How bad is it?" Stephen asked. Krav's eyes were hollow. "We've lost the outer districts, our perimeter is shrinking by the hour, and our supply—" He trailed off, shaking his head. Stephen's mind raced. They needed a game-changer, and fast. He activated a secure channel to his intelligence assets. "Any word on Novak's nuclear capabilities?" The response chilled him to the bone. "Confirmed, sir. Our underworld contacts report a shipment of old-style fission bombs, enough firepower to level the entire capital." Stephen's fists clenched. He couldn't let it come to that. He keyed his comm again. "Get me Mike Thompson, Jr. We've got a job for him." As Stephen briefed Mike on his covert mission to intercept the nukes, alarms blared throughout the command center. A technician's voice cut through the chaos. "Sir, we're detecting a breach at bioweapons facility Echo." Stephen's blood ran cold. He sprinted to the main view screen where grainy security footage showed Liam's forces swarming the secret lab. "No, no, no," Stephen muttered. Before he could formulate a response, every screen in the command center flickered to life. Liam's wild-eyed face filled the displays, his voice dripping with madness. "Attention, human vermin," Liam snarled. "I now possess the means to cleanse this world of your taint forever. Surrender the capital within 24 hours, or watch as your people choke on their own blood." The transmission cut off, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Stephen's mind raced through scenarios, each bleaker than the last. He turned to his assembled staff, their faces a mix of fear and unwavering tenacity. For long moments no one spoke. Then a grizzled colonel stepped forward. "Sir, we could try to hold out hope for reinforcements from Earth." He strode to the tactical display, quickly outlining his plan. "We'll split our forces. I'll lead our main body in a frontal assault on Novak's position. It'll be a feint, meant to draw attention away from our real objective." Stephen locked eyes with Mike. "While we keep them occupied, you'll take a small team and infiltrate Liam's mobile virus lab. Neutralize those bioweapons at all costs." Mike nodded, his face a mask of grit. "Consider it done, sir." As the command staff scrambled to implement Stephen's bold strategy, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The weight of so many lives pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. But he pushed the doubt aside. They had come too far to falter now. Stephen Freeman strapped on his combat armor, checked his weapon, and prepared to lead his forces into what might be their final battle. Whatever the outcome, he would face it head-on, fighting for the future of both humanity and their reluctant Pakled allies. Mike Thompson Jr. crouched behind a twisted hunk of metal, his eyes scanning the barren landscape. The acrid stench of radiation burned his nostrils. His team huddled nearby, faces grimy and exhausted. "Movement 2 o'clock, whispered Sergeant Chen, her voice barely audible over the wind's mournful howl. Mike peered through his scope. A Novak patrol drone buzzed overhead, its sensors probing the wasteland. He held up a closed fist, signaling the squad to freeze. The drone hovered agonizingly close. Mike's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot could give away their position, doom their mission. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he weighed the odds. After an eternity, the drone banked away. Collective sighs of relief rippled through the team. "That was too close," growled Corporal Rodriguez. "We need to find cover fast." They slithered through the irradiated ruins, every step a potential death sentence. The distant rumble of explosions echoed from the besieged capital. Back in the city, Stephen Freeman pored over tactical displays. Holographic projections showed the desperate state of their defenses. A harried engineer looked up from his console. "Almost there, sir. We've rigged the main thoroughfares to funnel any nuclear blast. It won't stop it, but it might buy us precious seconds." Stephen nodded curtly. "Good, what about Krav's militia?" General Krav's gruff voice crackled over the comm. "My boys are dug in tight. We'll hold as long as we can, but if those nukes hit—" "Understood," Stephen said. "Be ready to fall back on my command." The officer shook her head. "Nothing yet, sir, but we've got reserve units prepped for extraction." Stephen's face hardened. "They're out there, we just need to buy them time." Across the city, Novak's forces regrouped. The warlord paced in his command post, face twisted with rage. "Find them," he roared at his subordinates. "I want Thompson's head on a pike before we glass this miserable rock." Heavy assault units rumbled out of their staging areas, leaving a lull in the city's bombardment. Stephen seized the opportunity. As the city's defenders scrambled to reinforce their positions, cracks began to form in Novak's ranks. A trio of Pakled officers huddled in a secluded alley. Another nodded furtively. "I've got contacts in Freeman's camp. If we act now—" Deep in the wasteland, Mike's team stumbled upon the remnants of a Pakled settlement. Feral eyes gleamed in the shadows of ruined buildings. "Weapons hot," Mike ordered, "but hold your fire unless—" A primal scream split the air. A horde of savage Pakleds erupted from hiding, brandishing makeshift weapons. "Down!" Mike yelled as a volley of jagged metal shards whistled overhead. The squad returned fire, their precise shots dropping several attackers, but more poured from the ruins, driven by a maddened bloodlust. "We're outnumbered," Sergeant Chen shouted, her rifle clicking empty. Mike's mind raced, then he saw it. A feral child, skin mottled with virulent lesions. "Cover me!" he yelled, sprinting towards their medic. Dodging thrown spears and energy blasts, Mike snatched a vial from the medic's pack. He tackled the infected child, jabbing the auto-injector into its neck. Mike stood slowly, hands raised. "We can help you," he called out, "all of you." The pack-led leader, a hulking brute with ritual scars, stepped forward. He studied Mike with narrowed eyes, then barked an order in his guttural tongue. The attacks ceased. Mike nodded. Yes, and we need your help to save many more. The leader considered for a long moment, then grunted his assent. We guide, you cure. With unlikely allies secured, Mike's team pushed onwards towards the capital. But time was running out. Novak's mobile launchers took position, their massive barrels aimed at the heart of the city. The warlord's face filled vid screens across the battlefield. Surrender now, Novak sneered, or be reduced to radioactive ash. In the command center, Stephen straightened his back. He keyed the comm, his voice steady. Go to hell, he replied. Alarms blared throughout the city, but before the first missile could fire, a massive explosion rocked Novak's front lines. Mike's team burst through the perimeter, guns blazing. Their pack-led allies howled war cries, sowing chaos in the enemy ranks. Armored vehicles roared out of hidden bunkers, smashing through weakened defensive lines. They formed a protective cordon around Mike's position as Novak's second wave approached. Glad you could make it, Mike quipped as he clambered aboard. Stephen's voice crackled over the radio. Good to have you back, son. Now let's get the hell out of here. The extraction force fought their way back towards the city center, Novak's troops hot on their heels. As they neared the defensive perimeter, a bone-chilling whine filled the air. The sky lit up as Novak's nuclear payload arced towards the city. Emergency klaxons wailed. Evacuation transports rose from concealed hangars. All personnel prepare for immediate evac, Stephen ordered. Mike watched as soldiers rushed to board the transports. He turned to his team, saw the same persistence in their eyes. The transport streaked for orbit as the first warhead struck. Stephen's reinforced defenses held for precious seconds, allowing the ships to clear the blast radius. Mike gripped his rifle, staring down the oncoming wave of Novak's forces. The horizon turned white as a wall of atomic fire rushed towards them. Let's give 'em hell, Mike growled. The blinding flash faded, leaving Mike Thompson Jr. and his team blinking away after images. Acrid smoke filled their lungs as they stumbled through the rubble-strewn streets of what was once the Packless Prime capital. Comms check, Mike rasped, tasting blood and ash. Sound off. One by one, his surviving squad members reported in. Their voices were strained but alive. Mike allowed himself a moment of relief before focusing on their grim reality. We need to move, he ordered. Novak's forces will be sweeping for survivors. As they melted into the shadows of bombed-out buildings, the distant roar of engines signaled the last transports lifting off. Mike watched them streak toward the stars, carrying Stephen and the bulk of their forces to safety. He pushed down the twinge of regret, knowing his place was here. Days blurred together as Mike's team waged a relentless guerrilla campaign. They struck from the ruins, targeting Novak's supply convoys and communication hubs. Each small victory bought precious time for shell-shocked civilians to reach the human-controlled safe zones scattered across the planet. In one such raid, Corporal Chen planted explosives on a fuel depot, while Mike and Sergeant Rodriguez provided cover fire. As they retreated, the night sky lit up with the fireball of their handiwork. That ought to slow them down, Chen grinned, her face streaked with soot. Mike nodded grimly. Let's hope it's enough. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship of Earth's defensive fleet, Stephen Freeman stood before a holographic display of Packless Prime. The once vibrant world was now a patchwork of radioactive hotspots and devastation. Final casualty estimates, sir, a grim-faced aide reported. Over 12 million Packleds and humans confirmed dead, millions more unaccounted for. High-priority transmission cut through his dark thoughts. Earth's ruling council appeared on the main view screen, their faces etched with fury. This ends now, Freeman, the lead counselor declared. You have full authority to neutralize Novak and his loyalists by any means necessary. We want that madman's head on a pike. Stephen nodded, his mind already racing through potential strategies. Understood, Council. I'll begin planning our final offensive immediately. As the transmission ended, Admiral Ramsey approached. Sir, with all due respect, we should hit Novak's stronghold from orbit. One concentrated bombardment, and we end this nightmare for good. Stephen shook his head. And risk killing thousands more civilians in the process? No, we need a surgical strike. He turned to his assembled staff. Prepare our most elite operatives. We're going in ourselves to take out Novak at the source. Back on Packless Prime, Novak paced his fortified command center like a caged animal. Reports of sabotage and hit-and-run attacks flooded in from across the planet. Incompetent fools, he raged, hurling a datapad across the room. How hard can it be to crush a handful of human vermin? His second-in-command stepped forward cautiously. Sir, perhaps if we focused on consolidating our hold on the population centers. Novak's eyes blazed with madness. No! We will root out every last shred of resistance, round up anyone suspected of aiding the humans, fill the re-education camps until they burst. As Novak's purges intensified, Stephen's strike team made their approach. Stealth shuttles slipped through the debris field surrounding Packless Prime, their heat signatures masked by the lingering radiation. Stephen checked his gear one final time as they entered the atmosphere. He looked at the hardened faces of his hand-picked squad, the best Earth had to offer. This is it, he said, his voice steady. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we don't stop until Novak is dealt with. For Earth, for Packless Prime, and for every soul lost to this madness. The shuttles touched down in a desolate wasteland, miles from Novak's citadel. As the team disembarked, the harsh reality of their mission set in. They would have to cross an irradiated hellscape, evade Novak's patrols, and somehow breach one of the most heavily fortified positions on the planet. Stephen activated his radiation shield and took point. Stay alert, we've got a long way to go. For days they pushed onward, skirting the edge of lethal radiation zones and avoiding Novak's roving death squads. They witnessed firsthand the brutality of the warlord's regime, burning villages, mass graves, and long lines of civilians being herded into cramped transport ships. As they neared the outskirts of Novak's stronghold, Stephen knew they needed help. He reached out to his few remaining Packled contacts, arranging a clandestine meeting with the planet's battered resistance. In the ruins of an abandoned factory, Stephen faced a group of haggard Packled fighters. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Grok, eyed the humans warily. "Why should we trust you?" Grok growled. "Humans brought this destruction upon us." For a long moment tension crackled in the air, then Grok nodded slowly. "We will fight with you, but if you betray us—" In his command center, Novak studied tactical displays with growing unease. Something was off. The pattern of attacks had shifted, probing the defenses around his citadel. "Increase patrols," he snapped, "and begin bombardment of all suspected rebel positions within a 100-mile radius. I want this insurgency crushed." As the first shells began to fall, Stephen and his team huddled in a makeshift bunker. The element of surprise was slipping away with each passing second. "Sir," his second-in-command whispered urgently, "we need to make a decision. Do we abort or press the attack?" Stephen closed his eyes, weighing the impossible choices before him. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Stephen Freeman's boots crunched on the debris-strewn ground as he led his strike force toward Novak's citadel. The looming fortress cast long shadows across the ruined landscape of Packless Prime. Beside him, grizzled, Packled insurgents moved with grim purpose, their eyes fixed on the imposing structure ahead. "All units prepare for contact," Stephen said into his comm. The words had barely left his mouth when the air split with the screech of incoming artillery. "Incoming?" a voice shouted. Through the smoke and chaos, Stephen caught glimpses of Packled loyalists pouring from the citadel's gates. Their weapons blazed, filling the air with deadly energy bolts. "Push forward," Stephen roared, returning fire. His rifle bucked in his hands as he dropped two enemies in quick succession. The human Packled alliance fought tooth and nail for every inch of ground. Bodies littered the battlefield, friend and foe alike. Stephen watched in horror as several Pakled insurgent leaders fell, cut down by the withering hail of fire. Despair threatened to overwhelm the remaining fighters, but a gravelly voice cut through the din. "Stand fast!" A scarred Pakled veteran, Trellick, rallied the survivors. "For our people! For our world!" Trellick's words ignited a fire in the insurgents. With renewed vigor, they pressed the attack. Stephen found himself fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Pakled warrior as they neared the inner compound. "There!" Trellick shouted, pointing to a weak spot in the reinforced walls. "Plant the charges!" Under blistering cover fire, demolition experts raced forward. The explosion that followed shook the very foundations of the citadel, opening a ragged hole in its defences. Stephen's team poured through the breach, only to find themselves in a killing field. Concealed bunkers erupted with gunfire as genetically enhanced super-soldiers emerged. Automated turrets swiveled, their barrels tracking the exposed strike force. "It's a trap," Stephen yelled, diving behind a low wall. "Die! Find cover!" As his troops fought for survival, Stephen spotted a familiar figure perched high on a crumbling balcony. Mike Thompson Jr. had found a sniper's nest. The crack of his high-powered rifle punctuated the battle as he methodically eliminated the crews manning the artillery emplacements. With the big guns silenced, Stephen saw their chance. "Fall back to the hangar," he commanded. "Move!" The battered strike force retreated into the relative safety of the fortified structure. As the doors slammed shut behind them, Stephen knew they were far from safe. He gathered his lieutenants, outlining a desperate plan. Trellick nodded grimly. "I know these tunnels. I can guide you to his inner sanctum." As the main force prepared to engage Novak's reinforcements, Stephen led a 5-man squad into the bowels of the citadel. The winding passageways seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn bringing new dangers. Automated defense systems sprang to life. Laser grids, poison gas, and crushing walls threatened to end their mission at every step. Stephen's team disabled what they could and evaded the rest, their progress maddeningly slow. A clatter of armored boots echoed ahead. Stephen raised a fist, halting the squad. Novak's Praetorian Guard rounded the corner, their weapons at the ready. For a heart-stopping moment, discovery seemed certain, but a timely distraction, the distant boom of explosions from the ongoing battle, allowed Stephen's team to slip past undetected. With practiced efficiency, they breached the security systems and forced entry. Stephen burst into the room, weapon raised, only to find it empty. A holographic message flickered to life, Novak's sneering face filling the air. "Too late, Freeman," the recording taunted. "While you scurried through my maze, I left to oversee humanity's doom. My final solution awaits." Fury and frustration warred within Stephen as he stared at the empty room. But there was no time for regret. He keyed his comm, ordering an immediate evacuation of all friendly forces. As the wounded were loaded onto transports and the insurgents regrouped, an urgent transmission came through. Human sensors had tracked Novak's ship as it fled the planet. The tyrant's vessel was now converging with a gathering armada, and at its center, a massive dreadnought of unknown design. Stephen's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. Whatever Novak had planned, it went beyond mere conquest. This was extinction on an unimaginable scale. He turned to his battered but unbroken allies. "We're not done yet," Stephen declared. "Novak thinks he's beyond our reach. We're going to prove him wrong." As the gears of his mind began to turn, Stephen knew the real battle was just beginning. They would need every ounce of courage, cunning, and firepower to stop Novak's genocidal plan. The fate of humanity, of entire worlds, now hung in the balance. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.